It's my great pleasure to introduce Connie Baher today. Connie writes, lectures, and coaches on caregiving, life transitions, and reimagining retirement. She's the author of the new book, Family Caregivers, an Emotional Survival Guide, subtitled The New Longevity, Longer Lives, Longer Caregiving. Her work has been published in USA Today, the New York Times Magazine, Forbes, Dow Jones Market Watch, the Boston Globe, and she's also the author of The Case for Kick-Ass Retirement: How to Make the Most of the Rest of Your Life. She is a Harvard MBA, an entrepreneur, a former tech exec, and she's an award-winning lecturer. She's served on the faculties of the Honor Foundation, a career transition program for Navy SEALs and special operations personnel. She's worked extensively with nonprofit organizations and received the Royal Medal honoring her for her work with cultural organizations in Cambodia. She lives with her husband in Carlsbad, California, where she's been the caregiver for her mother for 13 years. Her mother is 105, a super ager to be sure. So Connie, welcome and thank you for taking the time to do this today. And
First of all, I have to have a big thank you to a number of people on this call for their help with the book and for welcoming me into the Family of Life Planning Network. There's Bruce and Julie, the great Barbara Shaman, Joyce Cohen, Anna Hall, so many people who have really been great and spoken with me in this project, introduced me to other wonderful caregivers and professionals and shared their time and their wisdom. So I'm truly grateful. What I hope we can do in the next half hour or so is share some of what I've learned from you and the others that I've talked with, and I hope we can illuminate some of what it means to be a family caregiver. And I hope that some of what we say here will, and what you hear from the voices of other caregivers, will resonate with you and spark your own memories and insights. And if you want to join us, not only for the rest of this time, but on Monday, love to hear more and share more of those experiences. To get us started, we'd like to find out a little bit more about you in relation to caregiving. And Bruce, do you want to talk? Bruce has some questions that he's put in the chat, but before you answer them, very simply, let's define for our purposes today, what is a family caregiver? Anybody who's unpaid, family or friend. You don't have to be doing the hands-on medical care. If you are managing or coordinating or just plain looking after the care of someone else, whether it's local or long distance, it all counts. You're a caregiver. So with that said, Bruce, do you want to explain the little chat stuff?
well, if you go to chat, you'll see the questions, which are you or have you ever been a caregiver, for whom, the spouse, partner, sibling, friend, for how long, and are you or have you ever been a professional who works with caregivers? You possibly could be both. And if you'll just put in your responses, and we'll then look at a few of them and move from there. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
While you're thinking about that, I have to say, okay, almost everybody seems to have a caregiving history, often invisible.
So Connie, let's just begin by talking about your terrific book. I'll put it in front of my face here so folks can see it. Which the title, if you can't read it, is Family Caregivers: An Emotional Survival Guide. And it's really a wonderful short book filled with the voices of people who have been caregivers and professionals, and woven through their are Connie's ideas and thoughts and hacks for making caregiving go better for you as a caregiver, and so you can survive it when you need a break. And she touches on many subjects in there, from everything from dealing with siblings to doing it on your own, to running on empty, and resentment, anger, guilt, and old wounds, among other things. And we'll get to some of these, but I encourage you all to get Connie's book. They're The voices are your companions, I would say, when you read it, and you see how universal the experience of caregiving is. So to start, Connie, you say early in your book that it's about the emotional side of caregiving, the part that hurts, the part that can leave us feeling inadequate, depleted, sad, the part that makes us want to scream. Why did you choose to focus on the emotional part?
Okay, well, it's because, as many books start, it was a question. I was wondering how I was going to get through this myself. So as Bruce said, I've been a caregiver for 13 years. Here is my mom. I'm going to share the screen for a second so you will see my mom. There you go. Can you see that?
Yep.
So there's mom, and Bruce said to say just a couple of words about her so you get a little sense. Mom was born in Cleveland. She studied photography in New York, married my dad, who was a journalist, and really had two long lives, is having two long lives. The first was as a wife and mother. They moved to Connecticut. She raised me and my brother. She typed my dad's manuscript. Some of you remember typewriters. They raised sheep and a couple of horses. Then they moved to Palm Beach, where my dad died and mom's second life began. She was 57. She moved out here to California, where I live, and she blossomed in a lot of new ways. She worked at the Atheneum Music and Arts Library in La Jolla and returned to her art. So she's now in a skilled nursing facility here on the same campus where I live in Carlsbad. And if you want to know what people do at 105, despite every ailment she has, she gets up every day and she wants to make art. Yesterday, she made 3 collages from the pages of a Japanese calendar. And she's going to be teaching a class on collage in November, if she makes it that far. And lastly, here's one of her watercolors that I love. And it is here on my desk with me every day. So that is some of the joy and spirit of my mom. You can probably tell I do love my mom, but I've also been a caregiver for 13 years. And you know, I mean, I was delighted to see how many of you are what I call long haul caregivers. As the job expanded and expanded, and you know what I'm talking about, I was getting overwhelmed, I was getting stressed out. And so this book started with a question: how am I going to make it through? And so, you know, why the emotional side? It's a very, very, as you all know, caregiving is a very, very complex task. Administrative, medical, legal, financial, et cetera, are all the things that are involved in managing someone else's life, really. And yet, and there's plenty of wonderful information, and many of the people on this call are incredible advisors and helpers in this area. But I was trying to figure out how to emotionally sustain myself over the long haul, how to handle this emotional side, because it, as so many of you know, it's a lonely job. And for most of us, it's the first time through. Now, I have tremendous respect for the serial caregivers on this call. Many of you have done this more than once, but for a lot of us, first time. don't know what the heck we're doing. We stumble, we pick ourselves up, we go at it again, we try to do better. In that light, that I set out to talk to other caregivers, see what I could learn from them, and also talked with what I think of as the professionals: hospice counselors, social workers, palliative care doctors, the people who've guided so many other caregivers through this journey. So that's why that aspect of the book.
You talk in the book about the caregiver conundrum. What is that?
Oh, I love that. Okay, let's look first at the job. You didn't apply for this job, probably. I would just bet that when all of you were young girls, young boys, they said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I bet none of you said, I want to be a family caregiver. You didn't apply for this job, you landed in it. The job requirements are constantly changing. You can't quit. And as they say in the world of consulting, the engagement ends in death. That's one heck of a job. And who usually gets that job? Sometimes it's the person who lives closest to mom, but not necessarily. Maybe you actually stepped up to the job, or maybe you're just the one who found yourself the person in the family who's the most competent, the most able to manage stuff. In a nutshell, the problem solver. And that's the source of the conundrum. The more I thought about it, I said, oh my God, here we are. The problem solver ends up confronted with the one problem that can't be solved. As one social worker told me, you can't stop the progress of the dementia. You can't cure the illness. So it's frustrating, but that's the caregiver's conundrum. And let me tell you a quick story. This is G. Todd Williams. He's the chaplain in Texas, and he tells this story. He found himself not only caring for his hospice clients, but also looking after his cousin John. I worked tirelessly, he says, to ensure that John's final weeks were his best. I ordered his favorite meals, picked up Sudoku puzzle books, decks of cards, and comfortable clothing. I even found my great-grandmother's chocolate pie recipe, and I baked it for John and the entire staff at the hospice facility. One afternoon, while talking with the social worker, I described all the projects I was working on for John. She said, you do know you can't fix all of John's problems, right? Sometimes life is just messy.
Well, indeed. And that's one of the great voices, many voices in the book. So before we move on, I was curious if you could tell us why, your voice is woven throughout the book, but the book is largely a curation of the voices of the 100 or more people you interviewed for it. Why did you choose that format for the book?
The more I learned and the more I saw how isolated caregivers feel, they feel alone, they feel invisible. And you can think about whether this matches up with your own experience. I found that they wanted to pour their hearts out. I mean, I would call them and I'd say, can I have 20 minutes? I just want to ask you a few questions. We'd end up talking for an hour and a half. They wanted to tell their stories because no one knows what we really do. So I wanted to share in our own words the challenges and the insights of caregivers as we grapple with this job that we find ourselves in. And I also was hoping to get some of the vitality and the raw honesty that comes from caregiver voices. Because at bottom, as Bruce said a minute ago, even though each story is unique, the themes are universal. And then I also wanted to offer the wisdom of the other folks, the professionals, the psychologists, the dementia counselors who've guided so many caregivers. So I roughly follow the caregiving journey from the beginnings to the ups and the downs, to farewells, to looking back. And for each section, I tried to offer a dialogue between the caregivers and the counselors.
The caregiving is obviously a very complex subject and has lots of tentacles. And I know we'll get to some of the other stories and some of the practical tools that you offer, but I wondered if you could tell us, where you don't just talk about the sandwich generation in the book, you talk about the club sandwich generation. And as the father of someone who owns a deli, that of course caught my eye.
All right, I'd love to talk about that. So I'm going to share the screen because we got little illustrations here. So here's what was going on as I was doing the research on this. I kept talking with people like many of you on this call who are, shall we say, of a certain age and caring for much, much older people in their 90s, in their 100s. So what I discovered was what we've got, as many of you know, is tons and tons of people who are turning 65 right now. Actually, I want to see if I think there's one slide. There we go. There we go. It was a demographic discovery, and it's what I think of as when worlds collide. Something unique is happening, and it's never happened before in America. Thousands of people in the US are turning 65 every day. You probably know this. In fact, it's 10,000 every day from now through 2029. And here's what that looks like. Over the next 40 years, the number of people over 65 is skyrocketing. There's going to be almost 100 million of us by 2060. And as you may know, the magic year is coming up. It's 2034, when the number of people in the US over 65 will be greater than the number of people under 18. So in case you hadn't noticed, we're getting older. But at the same time, at the top of the age pyramid, we've got this thing they're calling the new longevity. Between 2020 and 2060, there are going to be 3 times as many people over 85. And we've been talking about centenarians, 6 times as many people over 100. And of course, as many of you know who work in this field, it's the people over 85 who need the most care. And by the way, the Stanford Center on Longevity has this thing they call the new map of life. And what they're saying is, in the United States, as many as half of today's 5-year-olds can expect to live to the age of 100. But what I wanted to show you is, so here we've got this great collision of all these people turning 65 and this new longevity. There's 53 million family caregivers in the US. Half of them are over 50, and about 8 million are over 65, which is roughly 1 out of every 7 people over 65. So instead of the carefree years, those of you who work, right, and counsel people on retirement, right, we're supposed to, oh, wonderful, we're getting somewhere around the era of retirement and maybe some new adventures in life. We're going to travel, play golf, whatever we're going to do. Instead of the carefree years, we get the caregiving years. It's about the pills and the insure and the walkers and the wheelchairs. And the caregiving is more intense and it's lasting longer. Here's average caregiving hours per week of younger people is 19 hours. Caregivers who are 75 and older, 34.5. It's almost twice as many. And almost 30% of older adult caregivers are caring for someone for 5 or more years, and sometimes for more than a decade. So here's where we're getting to our club sandwich. When I talk to these older caregivers, and we could see it in what you wrote in the chat, they tell me, I took care of my mother for 10 years, my spouse for 12 years. So we've got this growing phenomenon of long haul caregiving, which means there's a new generation in town. The sandwich generation, you know about them, the middle-aged parents caught between the care of children and grandparents. And now we've added another layer. You can put this for your deli sandwich, right, Bruce?
Yeah.
It's the grandparents are now caring for their elderly parents. Here's some news on that score. I was just talking with the CEO of a national senior living chain, and she told me she's seeing this across the country. A new kind of mother-daughter team moving in. It's grandma and great-grandma. So welcome to the club sandwich generation. Who's taking care of great-grandma? Granny, maybe it's you.
You make a distinction between acute and long haul caregiving. Why? And tell us about it a bit.
Yeah, okay. I think the thing about acute, it's like a maelstrom. Those of you who've been through that, it's a tsunami. It hits you. It's 4 or 5 months of just everything hitting you all at once. That's has its own dynamics, but the long haul stuff has a different kind of dynamic. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You have to be able to sustain this stuff. And this is why, as I think Bruce was mentioning earlier, the self-care is so important. The support groups are so important. And it's also about multiple losses. Let me give you a couple of voices on this one. This is Debbie Lobat. She's a therapist who specializes in working with families of aging or chronically ill patients. She says some people, and she's talking about the people being cared for, she said some people don't want to go, and some people can't wait to go. You, as the caregiver, are also going through your own crisis of grief and loss, watching a loved one slowly disappear in front of you. Here's another voice, Bern Terry, wonderful fellow who has been a serial caregiver for many, many years, currently a caregiver to his mother, and also a director of business development for a caregiving consulting firm. So this is what he says. When we lose the person we're caring for, a lot of loss comes in little increments. I'm losing a milligram, maybe 1/20,000th of an ounce is going away. If you're with someone for the long haul, you start seeing the cumulative effect. You experience multiple losses. And there's one other thing, if I can add to it, one sort of third aspect, I think, of being a long haul caregiver is, bluntly put, you can outrun your love. Here's what I mean. Maybe some of you can relate to this. The impulse to care for somebody else may start with your love for them. Maybe you feel you owe your parents something. And initially you can feel very good about what you're doing. But as you get ground down, and I have to say a word that I hear all the time is depletion. I feel so depleted. As this happens, or as your person slides into dementia, it's not a two-way street anymore. So let me give you the voice of Fred. Fred is in his mid-60s. By the way, I should say that the names of the caregivers are pseudonyms, just to protect their privacy. So Fred's in his mid-60s, and He was the caregiver for his mother for over a decade. She died at age 96. Here's what he said. As the dementia continued, my mother stopped talking. There was no feedback, none whatsoever. You can't bring their mind back. You just have to think of your own North Star. What does it mean to be a good child, a good person? If this were me, what would I want? I scheduled haircuts and manicures because I sincerely thought she would like that. I got her a wheelchair that reclined. I had to feed her. I did what I could. Now that it's over, what did it mean? I did what I could. This is what you do. You do the level best you can. This is what you do. It brought me peace.
You talk about caregiving, and those of us who've been know why you say this can be the toughest job that you'll ever have. But many of the people you spoke with, and I think you assess this yourself from your own experience, and I know I do from mine, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about why it can be the most meaningful job you'll ever have.
Yeah, because I don't want people to think, even though I guess it's the stuff that hurts, that's the stuff that makes you want to cry out. And yeah, it's tough. I mean, a palliative care doctor who sees this all the time, he says, it's drudgery. I mean, so part of what we're trying to do is be frank and be open about it. But also there is another side, and it's not a Pollyanna deal here. But let me just start with a quote from an LPN member, our friend Yosef August. He wrote a book called Coaching for Caregivers, and he has been a caregiver for his mother and his father for over a decade. He said, the times I had with my parents were some of the most poignant moments in my life. I got to see my father in more ways than I imagined. He approached his surgery with an astounding degree of courage, and after the surgery, when it was clear that his days were limited, he had the courage and the strength to surrender, to be at peace. And then he says, and this is so lovely, he says, my mother was in a positive, grateful loop. You could give her a rose and she would say, thank you. And then she would see the rose a few minutes later and say, who gave it to me? And she would say, thank you. It was the gift that kept on giving. You see, he has a little humor that he brings to this whole thing. He said she loved everything, the view from her apartment, everything. That's how happy she was. She trusted me. And that was really important too. So the other side, right? The other side is a special kind of intimacy, getting to know a parent you may not have been with for years, gaining an understanding of what their life has been like. And of course, this applies to a spouse as well. It can be transformative. It can be a growth experience. And one other really good thing about long haul caregiving is that when you blow it, when you lose your temper, when you get triggered, when you just weren't up to it that day, you've got another day to get it right.
So I'm watching the clock, but
Yeah.
I want to get to a couple last things so we can open up just briefly. So two things, you have a section in the book on the hacks, the minute mood hacks, you call them. And I wonder if you could speak to them, and also if you'd like to speak to CARE, C-A-R-E.
Okay, great. Let me try to do it sort of briefly. So the minute mood hack. So here's the context. You all know, and you're probably tired of being told that you've got to take time for self-care. And the subtitle of this thing is how to take a break when you don't have time to take a break. So turns out that there's actually some research that says that even a minute can actually give you a chance to reset. This is Psychology Today. 1 minute of exercise can transform you, make you feel better immediately. The University of Michigan Health Services says 1 minute of tensing and relaxing your muscles can work. There are researchers who talk about micro breaks in the workplace. So why not micro breaks to reduce caregiver stress? And let me say, there are two things that I think really help. The first thing is, don't keep track of time. If you have an Apple Watch or even a kitchen timer, set it for a minute, or, if you're being generous, 5 minutes. Now you just play. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to keep track of time. It will tell you when your time is up. This is you letting go and recharging. So romp in the fields for that minute or 5 minutes, and then you get back into harness. Second thing, intention. You all know about this. Be mindful about what you're doing. That's what's really empowering about this, because the same minute spent, let's say chopping vegetables, you don't even think about it. But if you say, well, wait a minute, I actually like to cook, and I really enjoy preparing food and looking at it, working with it. I'm going to give myself a minute, and I'm going to be mindful about doing this because I love it. So those two things, let me suggest, briefly. So meditation, Barbara's our expert on that. The app Insight Timer, one word, free, has 25 different 1-minute guided meditations. Try laughing. Go to YouTube and pick your favorite late night comedian, or somebody doing stand-up on Netflix, or go to the Netflix podcast called Netflix is a Daily Joke. 1 minute, just take a minute. Outside stuff is terrific if you can. Walk around the block. They say if you look at the blue sky or something green, a lot of researchers find those colors to be very calming. There's a thing called an awe walk, AWE. There was an article in the New York Times, and it said, older men and women who took a fresh look at the objects and vistas around them on an awe walk felt more upbeat and hopeful. Forest bathing is another term that's come into use now. It just means a little time immersed in nature if you've got some nature nearby. Green exercise is another term. We all want to be really with it with these new terms, right? It's a mini workout outdoors. So those are some. There's about 30 of them in the book, but the point is really pick what you like. Listen to your favorite audio book, but just for a minute, just do it. And then if you're able, do it for a little bit longer the next day, a little bit longer the next day. But the whole point of it is, it's about, as I've come to think of it, reclaiming just a little bit of you, because when the caregiving is over, you're going to need this foundation.
No, those are, I love the hacks. They're really great. And I particularly resonate with the green. I had read one of those studies when I was caregiving, and there was a tree that I could see from my mother's apartment. And so I had a mantra that was go to the green whenever I got overwhelmed, I would say go to the green, and I'd go look out at that tree because I had read and it helped. I mean, who knows why these things work, but it worked. So I love the hacks in the book. So thank you. Before we go to Q&A, I just want to remind everyone that on Monday we'll do digging deeper, and we'll have a chance for more conversation. And Julie Nordstrom will help lead that. So Julie, if you'd like to say a word or so before we go to Q&A about digging deeper on Monday, I appreciate that.
So hello, everyone. So the goal for Monday will be, and we're hoping obviously that all of you can make it, is to really dig deeper into these topics. clearly, since all of you have had some background with caregiving, it would be really interesting to share our experiences. And I found that through the groups, the caregiver groups that I run, people gain so much from sharing experiences and also learning from each other. So I'm really hoping that through 3 main questions that we'll be focusing on, that we can sort of get to share our own experiences. The one thing is that, as Connie has talked about, is clearly the emotional aspects of caregiving is a huge area. But I'd like to acknowledge there are also other areas that are important with caregiving, such as the role of planning, the role of reaching out to others, and also Connie alluded to self-care. So I think we'll have plenty to talk about. And please, if you know of anyone else that you think could benefit from this, definitely this is open to all caregivers.
Thank you, Julie. And the same link that you use today, you can use on Monday, so you don't have to look for another link. And also, I just wanted to slip in here that our virtual meeting for the month of November, which we'll be sending out information about, will take place a week earlier than usual because of Thanksgiving. So it will be November 17th will be the virtual, and the Digging Deeper will be Monday, the 21st. So with that, just I think, Connie, if you wanted to, I believe, read something, and then let's turn it to Q&A. And I'd actually also quickly like to read, after you get done, something that Joseph is quoted in your book on. So if you would, I know you wanted to read a little bit of the gold ring, I think.
I would love to tell you the story of the gold ring, because it weaves together a lot of the themes we've talked about. So this is Helen. Helen retired from teaching and painting, and she was trying to figure out what she was going to do with her life. She's 76. She ended up being the caregiver for her mother for 13 years. Her mother died shortly after turning 100. And what Helen did was she moved from the West Coast to the East Coast to be her mother's caregiver. So she says, my mother was a tiny little person. She had been my dad's caregiver, and in 2007, Dad died. I said to myself, I've really got to be available for my mother. I remember being there with her, and we were looking through family possessions. We came across some old family jewelry. There was a gold wedding band. I slipped it on my finger, and I made this promise to my dad that I would always take care of my mother. She says, I was never going to put her in a nursing home. My mother was born in 1920. She had lived her whole life within 1/10 of a mile of where she was born. Her community was her church. There was no way she was going to move. It wasn't hard. She was an easy patient, which is not to say I didn't resent it at times and say, when is this going to end? At the same time, I realized how lucky I was to spend time with her, to revisit the home that I was desperate to leave when I was in my teens. I got to appreciate her and all she had been through. It gave me a purpose. I had a sense of purpose. I wasn't painting anymore. I wasn't teaching. It was my job, and I tried to approach it that way. Even though it was a mixed blessing, this has been a gift. And there's a coda to the story. I just got a letter from this person. She says, in July, my parents' property was sold, and boxes and boxes of old photos and letters were shipped out to me. As I slowly sift through one box at a time, I am meeting a couple I never knew. And the relationship with my parents continues to evolve. Oh yes, the gold band. I initially thought I'd be taking it off when the caregiving was over. but it's a little reminder of my mother, and it's a continuing comfort to wear it.
Lovely. Thank you, Connie. So just one of the stories that Connie has in the book is also again from Joseph August, who's a member of our Philadelphia chapter and the author of Coaching for Caregivers. And he was a caregiver for his mother and father for over a decade. And he wrote, or he told Connie, self-care, where do you get the message to finally do that? You're not necessarily going to get an email demanding that you do something for yourself. When I was camping out, he says, in Gainesville, while taking care of my father, a friend created a music tape for me when I would get back to my little efficiency apartment. I would put that on and I would dance. At those moments, all that existed for me was the dancing and the music. I was in a trance, outside the world of medicine, outside the suffering and problems. I think it's so important to find your own way of doing that. It feeds you that energy. Taking that gentle yoga class for just an hour, then you can go and you can be more present as a caregiver. Everybody has a mix of feelings. I really think it's part of being human. Maybe there are other people who are saints and really come out with of unconditional loving. But how about unconditionally loving ourselves? So thank you, Joseph, for those thoughts. So let's just open up the mics, or if you want to raise a hand and we can talk a little, we can push to 5:15 and have a little conversation and then hopefully continue on Monday. But first, thank you very much, Connie, for the presentation and for the gift of your book.
Thank you.
Connie, I was so moved by everything you said. And that picture of your mother is magnificent. When was that taken?
Just 3 years ago. That's what you look like at 102.
And is her mental and emotional attitude positive a lot, or is she struggling, or how would you describe what's going on with her right now?
Yeah, it's a struggle. I think it's two things. She keeps asking, my husband's a physician, she keeps asking him, how am I going to die? I mean, it's the fear. It's she wakes up in the middle of the night with a vivid dream. Oh my God, I've had a stroke. So, I mean, she's so close to the end and she knows it. The thing is she has some cognitive decline, but she is aware. She might not know that today is, whatever today is. I have to look at my Apple Watch and tell me what today is, but she knows it's the end, and that's hard. But the other side is she is at her very core an artist. And so it's visual. Her room, everybody in the whole skilled nursing facility goes in to see her room because it's full of her artwork. So it's a mix. It's a mix. And, it's the caregiver's conundrum. I am the problem solver par excellence. I can't solve this one, baby. I just try to be there and make life as good as I can for her.
Great. Julie?
Connie, I'm curious to know, through this journey of all the interviews that you've done and all the reading you've done, what would you say are the main lessons that you yourself have gained, and how has that helped you in your current caregiving situation?
I will tell you, and I was saying this to Bruce earlier, what's helped me is so many of the voices that are in the book, and I call on them at different times. Bruce and I happen to be talking about siblings, and that's a whole huge can of worms, which we could all go into at some point. But there's a woman in the book who had a sister, and they had a plan, and the sister was going to go visit the mother every other month, but she visited once and she never visited again. And the caregiver said, I just let it go. I need all my energy to be a caregiver. I just can't be bothered. And I say that to myself, just let it go. Just let it go. So it's that kind of thing. Yeah, there's a, it's for me, it was crowdsourcing. There's so much wisdom out there from the people who've been in the trenches and from the counselors.
Right. Kendall McCausland, and welcome to LPN.
I thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I am so thrilled to have been invited, and thank you to my cousin Kendall, who came up to visit my mother on her 92nd birthday, October 12th. And we had a little chat, and he ended up telling me about this gathering. And one of the things that I just want to say is, I feel like I'm not alone anymore. There are so many of you out there, and everybody's been doing this for so long. And I feel as though sometimes I'm like, ooh. And someone said to me, so what's the biggest thing you kind of learned about this? And the first thing that I can think of is my patience. I have done such a study in patience. It's really interesting. And does it matter for me to get frustrated, or does it matter if she's going to fight me on something? Does it matter? It's very interesting. So I so look forward to joining again. And thank you, Kendall, and thank you all of you for being there. I'm feeling emotional.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. And no small family resemblance there between the two Kendalls, I must say. Yeah.
But I had a question about the complexity for the person being cared for, going from a person, perhaps an image of being so independent, and now all eyes are focused on me. And what are the internal dynamics of the cared for person as they receive this care?
Yeah, it's maybe I could speak to that in this way. The focus of the book was primarily on the caregivers, but at the same time, this other journey that's going on there, as you're saying, is what is happening as this person is losing their independence. And if you think of it as a triangle, one end is the caregiver, the person being cared for, and then at the top where they come together, what I found was very often the caregiver grew in their own appreciation of just what you're talking about. They began to, not only because it's very painful for us, oh, it's all about me, this is a tough job, but how about the job that my mom's going through, right? As you're saying. And so there, I found it's fascinating to see as those things came together. And one caregiver, she said she'd been a very rebellious child, terrible relationship with her mother. Now she is taking care of her mother. And she said, my mother has macular degeneration. She's afraid she's going blind. She can no longer be, as you say, independent. She said, I'm learning to be more generous. My mother is a different person and I am a different person. And it becomes this growth experience for both of them.
Explanation. Thank you. Jan?
I probably have about 20 years of caregiving experience under my belt, with my mother-in-law first, and then segueing over to my mom. And what I realized maybe about the last year of my mom's life I had this thought that it had never occurred to me really, that I was like, oh my gosh, one day I'm not going to be doing all this caregiving. It just like sort of like hadn't occurred to me that there was going to be a stop at some point. I don't know, it just seemed like, because I've done it so long. And and my mom passed away. It's exactly a year now. And what I didn't anticipate in this post phase was still how much responsibility and caregiving continues afterwards as well. With my mom's estate, and being the executress and all the things involved with, tying up all those loose ends. And so that was like, just again, sort of surprising. And I'm wondering, to what extent do you look at people once they have lost the parent, that, the people that they've been caring for such a long time, and, what kind of attention do they need? What are they, going through, and what can we offer them?
Yeah, that's a great point. Maybe I could bring up one thing that relates to that in particular. There's a wonderful book by a guy named Arthur Kleinman. He was a physician and he cared for his wife through the ravages of dementia. It's called The Soul of Care. It's a beautiful book. He writes, care does not end with death, but involves actively caring for memories. And I think this ties to our previous discussions on grief. So, I mean, from the emotional side, there is that. A lot of people, I got to tell you this other story that I think relates to it. I mean, yes, there is, of course, all the administrative stuff. There's a story, and this is an LPN story. You all know Connie Goldman. Connie Goldman, who recently passed away, wrote a wonderful book about caregiving. And I put a quote in the book because she talks about a woman who took care of her father, never got along with him. It was a thorny, terrible thing, and he died. And afterwards, letters would pour in from other people about her father. And she began, as we sort of said earlier, you begin to see the person in a new light. And she said, actually, she began to appreciate what his life had been like, to see him through other people's eyes. And she said it was very healing. And she said, you can repair a relationship even after the person has died.
Oh, that's interesting. Mary Radu, we'll make, unless there's someone who has a pressing question after Mary, we'll make Mary the last question, but go ahead, Mary.
Well, the thought that came up to me as you've been talking, Connie, and we've had other comments, is that one of the greatest lessons that I'm experiencing so far, and I think this is probably one that all caregivers and their loved one go through, is the letting go process. Letting go of the relationship that was, letting go of the abilities that the person who's being cared for had, letting go of the other life that the caregiver had before the caregiving continued to grow, and that it's about being in the moment and being mindful as much as possible to be able to learn those lessons of letting go before the big letting go that each of us will go through.
Yeah.
Beautifully said, Mary.
That's very profound. Maybe can I tie it up with a story that relates to what Mary said?
Please.
This is a story of, I mean, I think it speaks in part to what you're talking about. And frankly, I gotta say, on a personal level, I don't know if I'm doing a good job about this letting go stuff, because I think, as Jan was saying, this has been going on so long, I can't imagine what it would be like not to be my mom's caregiver. So I'm not sure I got this thing knocked. But let me tell you this quick story about a man who has dementia, and he's in a senior care daycare program, and his daughter, who lives out of town, came to visit and was talking with the counselor and said, "Oh, such a shame you didn't get to know my father as he was." And the caregiver said, "Such a shame that you haven't gotten to know your father as he is."
One follow-up thought to this idea of the afterlife of caregiving, which surprised me as well, Jan, was I'd cared for my mother for 4 years, and my caregiving was pretty joyful. We had a great experience together during my caregiving, and as many people experience, I learned things about my mother during those years that I did not know. But after she died, when the last year as some of you know, I had brought her up to Massachusetts and she was with me. And I would find that certain hours that I would normally go to see her, I had a kind of vestigial response, like an alarm clock went off in my head. Oh my God, I'm late for visiting my mother. I'm late. I forgot to do something. And that lasted for a very long time that, I couldn't have predicted that, that there is this afterlife to it all that goes on.
Yeah, if I could just share a story, because it really relates to all of this. I lost my mom several years ago, but she was a mathematician, and she was she had some medical issues. She was in the ICU unit, all hooked up. She had a thing down her throat. I called my physician cousins and said, "What do I do? And what can I do?" And they said, "She will give you a sign." And I thought, this is no help. And anyway, we hung up, and sure enough, she couldn't speak, but the nurse gave an abacus. And Mom was very good with this. And she looks at it and she spells out, "Settle the bill." And fast forward a few months later, I was now living with her in Florida. And we were sitting on the edge of her bed and she's holding this little cup of cranberry juice. And she dropped it. And she just went, "Oh, Edna," that was her name. And I said, "Don't worry about it. I'll clean it up." And she said, "No, I think I'm dying." And I said, "Mom, what does that feel like?" And she said, "I'm letting go."
Oh, wow.
And so I'm listening to your conversation. And you see, there's the humor side, and then there's the other side. And then we had a poignant next few weeks together. But it just seemed like the beginning of the end. And it was a combination of they were humorous, and there was a combination of the humor and then the reality.
Well, that's a great place to end. Connie, I'll give you the last word, but again, everyone, I hope you can join us on Monday using the link for Digging Deeper, where we can continue this conversation. I know that Julie has some prompts to help us, so we look forward to that. But I'm going to give Connie the last word, and we thank you very much, Connie, for your work on this and for leading us today in this conversation.
Well, thanks to all of you. It's been wonderful to share this. And I think when Kendall's cousin said, "I don't feel alone," that's what it's about. We are a special club. We don't talk about it. You don't lead with the fact, "Oh, hello, how are you? Nice to meet you. I'm a caregiver." We don't talk about it, but we've been there. We are there. And as I often say, no one knows what we do except us. So thank you for sharing, for allowing me to share with you. And I do hope if you can make it on Monday, because then I'll shut up and we really want to hear from you, because maybe this has brought up some memories, some insights. So we would love to continue the discussion, and thank you all very, very much.